So we're now live. Very, very big welcome. Thank you for joining us on Being Fine. This is one of the live shows that we're doing for the Being Fine book. And I'm really thrilled as the editor, because obviously I've read all these amazing chapters. They're all in now. But very thrilled to introduce tonight to you guys, Jamie Marloo Thomas, coming all the way from Australia. Hi, g'day, Jamie.
G'day, how you doing?
I used to be able to say that quite well when I was in Australia, but sorry that my accent's completely gone now. I'm really good, thanks. Really good. How are you doing?
Yeah, fantastic today. I'm actually glad that I thought it was yesterday, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute, but yeah, I'm glad it's today, and I feel really great today.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, yeah, definitely want to hear about that. But yeah, really glad to have you in the book. I mean, obviously, we've met on the last project I did, Silver Linings, where you and Sarah both obviously wrote in that book your amazing story of the differences that you've seen through lockdown. But this is a very different book, so I'm really grateful that you've kind of agreed to come on this because it's been it's already a powerful book, even though it's not even been published yet. And the reason why is that the difference in the authors, and we had a live show earlier as well with Bob Hayward, and he's already had a journey within himself just by writing these words as a chapter. So Jamie, there's a gazillion questions I could ask you, but obviously as an Aboriginal man, you have had one hell of an upbringing, which on some levels sounds wonderful, running through the bush as free as a bird. You compare yourself to Mowgli. I would never know how to say that, from the
Yeah,
Jungle Book.
yeah.
My kids would be so envious of you on a level. But it's not quite as good as that as it sounds, was it for you? So tell us about your upbringing and what it was like to be an Aboriginal boy.
Yeah, it's thanks, Joe. And first, I'd say ngata manga tuk malu ka tangane. Kire warang chapulala ya meneng, wangunuchun warabarang alame, wangunuchun warabarang mara, wangunuchun warabarang meneng. Just honoring the ancestors, Mother Earth, and the traditional lands that I'm on, and extend that to where all your listeners are. Honoring Mother Earth and the ancient ways of connecting. So, yeah, look, it was my father was Aboriginal, my mum was non-Aboriginal, and so it was one of those things, and like a lot of mixed heritage, mixed race people, kids, you weren't often quite sure which side of the fence you were on, and sometimes the one side of the fence was great, the other side wasn't so great, or vice versa. But I was, like you said, one of the things that I've tried to do a lot more as I've gotten a lot older is to focus on the really great things that were a part of my childhood. Yes, there was some not so great things like a lot of people experience in dysfunctionality of family violence and substance abuse saturated environments. And as I've gotten a lot older, I did spend a couple of decades focusing on all the negative stuff. And I guess from that negative stuff, I drew on a lot of experiences that helped me go on to work in those fields because people could relate to me because I'd lived their story. So it was really easy for me to understand people's journey. So I worked in, that counseling stuff. But as a kid, though, having that escapism in the environment in the bush was something that I really focus on a lot now. And, and when I visit back home now, I really focus on those good memories as opposed to the not so good memories.
Yeah, because you said, it's really fascinating that you said you escaped to the wilderness, which, is quite an interesting, is it a parody? I don't know. It just sounds like an odd thing to say, but there was a lot going on for you, wasn't there? So what can you give us a picture of were you brought up in like a township or kind of
Yeah.
a camp?
So
Yeah.
in Australia, one of the states is Victoria, and the eastern part of Victoria is the pointy beaked bit for people playing at home geographically, if you want to look that up. And it was a timber industry region, so there was a lot of the timber industry was quite a part of the economy of our workplace. So there's a lot of rugged, rough and tough and burly blokes throwing bits of wood around and cutting chainsaws. And I suppose in today's society, we would have labelled a lot of it toxic masculinity in a way, and yeah, so there's a lot of small towns. Often the population was, no more than 3,000 people. Orbost was where I was born. It got up to about 5,000 people, but otherwise it was a couple of hundred people. The little townships sort of tucked away out in remote parts of the wilderness, where the logging operations happened. And played a big part in providing food for our families. Our schools often were no more than, I think the biggest school I went to as a primary kid was 30 children, and the smallest school was like 5 of us at the school. Because it was so far east, they would send the worst teachers up there. So, we'd get teachers, that would go home. They'd go home at lunchtime because the house was next to the school. They'd have a feed, drink a bottle of wine, come back, fall asleep in the afternoon, and we'd just go out and play. So it was pretty loose up that way back in the late 70s, early 80s. Yeah, so it was it was like I said, very isolated in some parts.
Yeah, right. And that's obviously because your mum was quite young when she had you, wasn't she? She was very
Yeah,
young.
Mum was 16. Mum was 16 when she had me, and that was a chance encounter with my dad. It was I always think of meatloaf. It was a hot summer night. There was hot summer nights and the beach was burning. Mum always, I remember one time I took Mum to a ride to the beach, and Mum never had a car, and I got my car for the first time. I took it down the beach, and I took it to this place that I always used to go as a kid. I used to hitchhike down to the beach. It was about 30 Ks. It's about 15 mile. And she goes, "Oh, what'd you come here for?" I said, "I always come here." And she goes, "Why?" She goes, "Oh, that's where you were conceived, over there on that rock." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "That's where I sit and watch the sunset." She goes, "Oh, yeah, that's where he was conceived, and it was about sunset." I'm like, "Oh, no, don't tell me that." So literally my place of creation was embedded in my cells, and I would just go back there and just sit there. And I struggle to go back there these days, but it's okay.
Too much information.
Too much, Mum. Too much.
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting to hear how you ended up becoming someone who was the counsellor. You were the person, the go-to person, until obviously you suddenly realised that you needed to help yourself. So what happened in that moment? What was the reality then for you when you realised actually you've got something you've got to get sorted yourself?
It was never something that I tended to fall to be. I just fell into it. My first job I ever was a park ranger, and that was my dream job. That's all I ever wanted to do, was work in the bush, because that's where I grew up and found solitude and solace. So it wasn't until I was 20 years old and I moved to Alice Springs, which is in the middle of Australia in the desert, amongst people up there, mob up there, working with young kids, who had a lot of family violence issues, drug and alcohol issues. And my job was a sport and recreation officer, taking them to play sports, but obviously a lot of the other stuff just compounded, and we couldn't get them there because of those issues. So I started working I sort of fell into it really as a 20-year-old young man. And then when I moved back to Victoria, same thing happened. I didn't have a job, walked into the local community, said, "I'm looking for a job." And they said, "We've got a drug and alcohol counsellor here." So I'm not qualified like paper-wise, but I got a lot of experience in it. And then, so I just started supporting people, going to appointments and things. And then I started to but all the while not even unpacking my own stuff. So it was basically just chuck a Band-Aid on your own stuff and go and help other people, but there'd be times where I'd be triggered by things because it just reminded me of my childhood. And I always talk about putting on that mask, and I'd go home and I'd just revert back to self-medication, which is what, a lot of my family members did to deal with family violence and trauma and grief. So, yeah. And because people expected me to be the one that had it together and the strong one, it was quite ironic, but it was just what you did to save face, but also to, if other people would have thought, well, if he can't have it together, how can I have it together? He's given me all this advice, which is great advice, and it helped a lot of people. But I just hadn't dealt with my own stuff. And bits and pieces, I tried to get help from elders and stuff like that, but never really stopped being in the service of others to take some time to look after myself. And that was where, over 12 months ago now, where I just decided that stop the world and let me off. I really needed to stop being in the service of others and be in the service of self and just heal from that after, 28 years. And as I was saying before, yesterday I woke up. I don't even know why. Like, we'd been away on the weekend and we drove home 7 hours. We drove from Gippsland back to where we live, and I ate some pretty terrible food on the road because I didn't prepare the trip properly, and it doesn't play well, like you are what you eat. And I didn't eat some really great food, and I woke up yesterday morning and I was just crying. I don't, and it says like, what's wrong? I'm like, oh, I don't know. And I thought I was about to go on with you, and I'm like, I'm a mess. And I was like, and that's probably not a bad thing, because that's the one thing that I won't do anymore is to put on a mask. Someone asks me how you going, and I'll say, feeling shit today, or I'm not feeling very well, or I'm really struggling. I'm at a really good place where I can be honest with people about that. And for a lot of people that have known me, that's a something that they're not used to, and even my family are not used to that as well. So yeah, it's just something that again, it's about making sure that people get the right information about mental health and mental illness, and the right ways of supporting people through those processes when people say, yeah, I'm not okay. So yeah, so today's a different day. I woke up a lot better. I got some.
Well, that's good. I mean, we don't mind tears. We don't mind, but and like you say, it's good to cry. It's good to release, isn't it? That's what we're doing when we're crying. But
Yeah.
but great that you can be open, and that's definitely a theme through the book. Is that actually by being vulnerable yourself and showing your emotions, it just does encourage the people around you to do the same, doesn't it? Someone has to change it, I think, and yeah. So, and I'm kind of intrigued by the whole kind of helping others, which is always interesting, isn't it? Because I guess you were aware that you had struggles with your obviously addictions, but you like you say, you keep putting the plaster on. Why do we do that? Do you think? Why do we keep putting the plaster on?
For myself, I ran away from home at 12 and went to live with my uncles, and I was very shy and reserved, and myself and a few friends used to park our bikes behind a motel because we had nice push bikes. We didn't want other kids pinching them at school, and then we'd walk the 200 meters to school. But we'd found it in the back of the motel. They'd throw out all the alcohol bottles that had a little bit in them or half full or whatever, they were out of date or something, and we just, as a joke, started to drink them, at 12, 13 years old, and that helped me cope. I'd go to school at that age, pinging, and having confidence, and it was, just at a very early age, it just became a tool to cope, I guess, and because I'd seen it happen so much in my life. So yeah, for me, it was just becoming a habitual part of, coping, but not coping, but coping, I guess.
Yeah, so it was the norm then, I guess, when you're surrounded by something that you'd either normalize it or you rebel against it, don't you, I suppose? And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and growing up with alcohol, I was never really much of a social drinker. I mean, it's like on the other day, like I went home and, a couple of boys are having beers and like, do you want a beer? I'm like, no, let's make me a cup of tea. Like was never one to really be peered into that stuff, but it was definitely a medication for me. I saw it more of a medication than a social thing, because I just rather talk to people sober, because you start drinking around and people start talking, silly, and, getting all emotional, and, yeah. But yeah, it's a strange, I had a strange relationship with alcohol.
Yeah, well, and yeah, I suppose it is used as a medicine, isn't it? Sadly, I think that's you don't realize when you've crossed the line, I guess, but when it becomes like that. And so did you, support wise, because obviously, that it sounds quite a lonely journey for you, and even though you were surrounded by people, do you think that's true, that you can be surrounded by people and feel still quite lonely?
Yeah, and look, one of my biggest things was I had some amazing people around me, and I've had some amazing people in my life,
Mm,
and I always have this sense of guilt of burdening them with my stuff,
mm,
especially when they were going through their own stuff. I really felt responsible for their. I just kept feeling responsible for their well-being as opposed to, and even today, like I've got a couple of men that I reach out to occasionally, two fellas, three fellas in particular, and I'm still always mindful. They say it all the time because I used to say it. It doesn't matter what time of night, doesn't matter what time of day, ring me. If you need me, you ring me. I'd rather you ring me than reach for that bottle. And you just don't, because you might see something on social media that they're going through a hard time, or you might have a conversation and they tell you about something that they're going through before you get to tell them about the stuff that you're going through. So you just don't, because it's like, you don't, you want to, again, it's about wanting to please and support them as opposed to, and I look, I've been to, throughout my life, probably about 23, I went to my first psychiatrist appointment. The psychiatrist fell asleep during my telling my story, and I just didn't have any trust or faith. And then when I started to go to, all I wanted to do was, they didn't want to hear my story; they just wanted to give me medication. And I was like, "Nah, I'm doing that already. Like, I've got to take the Band-Aid off and clean it right out and heal it properly." And I found some really good people, both professionally and not professionally, that allow me to do that, because I think that's the biggest component, is finding people who understand you and you can relate to, basically. It's like anything. It's like mechanics. You get good mechanics and poor mechanics. You get
mm.
good doctors and not so good doctors because their communication isn't, suited to how you like to converse.
And how have you healed and sort of found your journey, Jamie? How have you managed to do that? Because obviously now you very much use that as part of your work and what you offer at your incredible community at Waiapa.
Yeah.
But yeah, how have you managed that?
Look, and that's the other thing, look, one of the things I wasn't doing in the last probably 5 years is actually using the modality as a healing tool. And, again, I Sarah's, used it a lot better than I have, but yeah, the more I use Waiapa as a tool, the more meditation, the more connection, when I'm eating really healthy organic food, it's good for the planet and it's good for me. It's good for me physiologically. It's good for me psychologically. Um, you know, so getting out in nature a lot more is, obviously better for anybody. So really making conservative efforts to do that stuff. But again, though, it's about, you've got to put the work in. And it's what I say to people, Waiapa is about reducing our consumerism and materialism. I'm not perfect. There's people out there, living off the grid, growing their own food. They don't have a car. They don't watch TV, and they're not Aboriginal people. Like they live in real Waiapa lifestyle. And it's a bit like the tool. Like there are people out there that have used Waiapa as a tool for their mental health, and it's healed them. And it's like, well, why did they go? Why hasn't it healed you, Jamie? You're the inventor of this thing. And I'm like, no, I didn't invent it. It's a concept that we all did. I'm just not great at using the tool, and I'll be the first person to say that. I'm not a hypocrite, and I'm not going to pretend anymore. But yeah, the last 12 months, the more that I've used Waiapa, it's definitely helped and healed me in a way to make better choices and better decisions. So.
Yeah, well, and we don't really want to see perfect, do we? It's really, I should imagine the people in your community find you more relatable, that you're prepared to sort of say, well, actually, I'm still working on me. I might just be a tiny bit ahead of you, but only a little bit. Is that what you
Yeah.
find?
Look, there's two ways. There's two ways. People actually, I think it's that societal thing, is that people want heroes. People want these standards that need to be that need to be in community or want to be met, and they want to be able to get there. And it's like anything, when you find out your childhood hero isn't what they were, you get sort of shattered. My dad was like that. My dad wasn't in my life as a young kid, but everyone that I met knew him and said, oh, he was amazing. He had the body of a god, and he was a great boxer, and he could sing, and everyone loved him, and he used to drive beautiful cars. But when I met him, he like 16 years later, he'd fallen into alcohol and that, and he was a mess. And so my whole ideology as a kid was just ruined. And I had to learn to understand his journey and not judge him. And I think that's the other thing that, we talk a lot about in Waiapa is about judgment's a very slippery slope. When you start judging people on their lifestyle or their choices, and we say it a lot in Waiapa, we don't judge someone on their consumerism and their materialism because that's their journey. I've been on that journey and I'm on it from not even to mindlessly consuming, the latest suit or the latest pair of runners or the latest gold chains, or I've been through that journey of going, well, do I need those things or do I want those things? Well, I don't need them. Why do I want them? So again, it's about expectations of individuals and humans. The judgment is we haven't walked a mile in that person's shoes, but we're often, especially with the invention of social media, we're just so quick to judge without knowing the whole story. So yeah, I think that there's a two parts there, Joe. I think you're right. I think people want to be relatable, but I think there are people also that they want a standard, and so it's trying to find that middle ground to that's what I say in my app. I'm no eco guru. I'm no eco god. I'm far from it. I'm just a bloke who is trying to do the best he can and saving the planet for generations to come. So when people come to me for advice about stuff, I go, look, I'm pretty messed up too. I'm on a healing journey, but feel free to have a yarn. I'm far from perfect.
Oh, well, but you've got such a clear purpose, or what's known as a dharma, which is just so lovely to hear, and we can't we, if we stay focused. But it's been really amazing listening to you, Jamie, and let's bring it back. I'd like to ask for your top sort of tips of support for people right now, but just that final, like going back to your statement about wearing a mask. So there might be someone watching, listening, thinks, well, is that me? Because actually sometimes when we're in the thick of it and so used to being and feeling a certain way, we don't recognize we're wearing a mask. What would you say to someone who's suddenly thinking, well, actually, perhaps that's me?
Definitely listen to your, that I'll listen to your heart, listen to your gut, because that first reaction is emotional when you respond to something. And then, that's the first 3 seconds of reacting. And then your head kicks in and goes, oh, you can't let it out, or you can't say that, or you can't. So listen to that and just breathe through it before you speak. Because now I've been in work situations or even friendly environments where something will trigger me, and my gut will go, oh, that's triggered me or whatever. Then my head will, without breathing through it, I'll go, oh, no, that's all right. You can talk about that, or, this is my opinion on that. I think just sitting and breathing in your initial feeling, and, before you verbalize that or act out on that, because, I just kept going straight, bang, put the mask on. Don't be your authentic true self, because people might not be prepared for that. But at the end of the day, it's just a communication strategy. And I think for me, if I had done that, if I had actually breathed and actually spoke up and asked for help a lot earlier on in my early 20s, I would have been far more better situations. But hey, it is what it is. I'm here because of those bad decisions and bad choices. I'm here where I am because of those. And I'll probably never take that back, because who knows where it'd be. But so yeah, I think my advice is to be your authentic self and sit in it and breathe and feel that emotion, because whether it's hurt, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, confusion, it's okay. Like you said, we're human beings. We are very nuanced emotionally. And I think that the systematic programming, especially for men, is that stoic, upper stiff lip and straighten your back, and, boys don't cry, get up and dust them off and don't cry, it's just a scratch. It's like, pick them, but it's okay to be held and to be cuddled and embraced. So yeah, sit in it and then just, be yourself, express yourself.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I like you said, you just take 3 seconds to, just before you automatically speak. We all rush into answering, don't we? Or rush into thinking, but without the feeling first. So that's a great bit of advice. And you know, I really appreciate you being in the book, and we're the last author put their chapter in today, so we are ready to start sorting out the book, designing it, getting it ready to be published. And I really appreciate you. Just finally, why were you drawn to the book? And you know, obviously I know the answer, but for the viewers and the people listening, why does this matter to you about speaking up as men?
Well, I think, you know, it's society and structures, again, for men, you know, and for women too. But, you know, women seem to be a lot more better equipped to talk about their feelings and emotions. Not always. I know my mum often struggled with that. But for me, yeah, definitely to support other men in this journey and to change that culture. You know, it's okay to be weak. It's okay to be vulnerable, more to the point. And it doesn't make you any less manly. You know, I think that changing that narrative of what a man is in the last couple of hundred, maybe couple of thousand years has been altered. And I think that, yeah, that's not a good thing. You know, I've been in cultures where men will walk up the street holding hands and cuddling and crying, and I think that that's just natural. That's human. That's the humanness of it. So having this opportunity to share my story, and thank you so much. I know we did the other chapter in Silver Linings, and to be able to you know, back it up with another little yarn, I'm very appreciative. And I want to thank Sarah Jones, who puts my words into writing, because I really struggle with articulation of the written word, obviously not with the verbal word. Mum used to say I could talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles. I'm still not quite sure what that means. I'm hoping it's a compliment, but yeah, that was my reason, was to encourage and to reach out and say it's okay not to be okay, and to get that help where you can find it.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate that, and great to have you in this book. And you know, you've written about wearing a mask, and another author called Raj Korea has written about wearing a mask. You have phenomenally different stories, but there's obviously a similarity in what you're trying to encourage other people to do is to change that. So blessings to you and Sarah. Thank you so much for coming to us very early on in Australia, and I look forward to seeing you again at the next authors events. And obviously, if you want to come along to any of our other live Facebook events, we'd love to have you as well. So
definitely, I'll send an email, because my notifications are not on WhatsApp. So thanks for that, Joe.
Don't worry. Thanks for coming along, Jamie. If you could hang on, we'll have a quick chat after I end the recording. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I'm Jo. This is the Being Fine book. Will be published next month, and we look forward to sharing these remarkable stories from people like Jamie. Take care, everyone.